There are things no one told me about humidors, and I'm going to tell you everything. Hey everyone, I'm Dave with Beast Made Reviews, of course a channel dedicated to reviewing quality at different price points. And if you like cigars, you may have been wondering, do I need a humidor? Well, I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about humidors, how to maintain them, and I'm going to tell you everything that no one told me about humidors. And if you like this content, feel free to subscribe down below. And if you want to support me, I have some links down below. I have some curated pieces that I think you'll really like. You can check out my website as well for some other products. And I'll also have links down below to all the products that I'm mentioning in this video. Those are affiliate links and those will help out the channel anytime you buy from them. And I really appreciate it when you do that. Thank you so much. So, point number one, what is a humidor? You've all seen the boxes. Maybe you've walked in a walk-in humidor at a cigar shop. Maybe your friends have one. Maybe you have one. Humidors come in a lot of different sizes and varieties of formats. And regardless of what type of humidor you get, they do the same thing. They keep your cigars humidified at a certain humidity range. My next point is just what a humidor does. Because cigars are made of tobacco plant material, they're made of leaves, and those leaves are porous. So they absorb and they give off moisture just like a sponge does. So for instance, if you were to take a dry sponge and put some water in it, that sponge would absorb the water inside it and it would hold the water for a certain amount of time. If you leave that sponge out, then it will release the moisture into the air. And like a sponge, cigars do the same thing. They will absorb moisture from the air or they will give off moisture if you leave them out. You want to keep the cigars at kind of a medium range of humidity so it burns well and so it tastes good. And because humidity and temperature varies a lot, even in your own climate, the solution here is to get a humidor, which places the cigars into a sealed box and holds a humidity and a temperature range that doesn't change too much from one extreme to the other. This will maintain the life of the cigars, as well as maintain a consistency in the smoking experience. My next point, do you need one? My short answer is yes, you probably do. If you're only an occasional smoker and you just buy a cigar every once in a while and you just immediately smoke it, then this is not for you. You don't need a humidor. But if you have a number of cigars and you need a place to put them, yes, you definitely need a humidor or some type of place where you store your cigars in a humidified environment. My next point are the downsides of not humidifying. If you don't humidify your cigars, you'll be at the whim of your environment. If it's too moist in your environment, it'll absorb moisture or give off moisture if it's too dry, and that will vary from season to season. But the biggest downsides are just how a cigar will react if it's not humidified properly. If it's under humidified and too dry, it'll burn too fast, it'll give off bitter flavors, and if it's too moist on the inside, then you risk mold, it'll burn too slow, it might go out, and in both cases the draw will be bad, and the burn may get wavy on you, or maybe even canoe. Canoeing is what happens when the burn is really wavy to an extreme, and burns along one side, almost like hollowing out a canoe. My next point is the correct range of humidity. Now there are different schools of thought when it comes to a specific humidity percentage, but generally the sweet spot of humidity is between 69 and 72% humidity. You don't want to go any lower or any higher than that. But typically if you stay within the 69 to 72% range, you're good. Next, what can be an actual humidor? Now there are lots of different types of humidors, and you'd be surprised to see all the ways that you can actually make a humidor. The first way is just a bag, a sealed bag. Now if you bought cigars online, you may have already seen sealed cigar bags, and that is actually pretty fine, especially for a few cigars. That seal holds reasonably well. It's not perfect, but it holds reasonably well, and as long as you have a fresh humidity pack in there, you should be good. Bags are a great way to hold maybe a little bit of cigars at a time, or transfer them or give them away to someone. It's just a really great way to have an alternate way of humidifying your cigars. Next is Tupperware. Now a lot of people have dubbed this the Tupperdor, which is just a Tupperware humidor, and this works fine, but you can only use certain ones. Not all Tupperware is the same. What you want is one with a good rubber seal, good gasket on the top there. That will keep the moisture on the inside. Of course, I'll have a link to a good one down below from Amazon. Also a bonus with this, if you have a Tupperdor, you can add Spanish cedar blocks that you could just buy separately, and that'll kind of give you the best of both worlds of a wooden humidor and the cost savings of a plastic Tupperware container. All right, next are just wooden humidors. Now, of course, this is probably the standard for humidors. These come in a lot of different sizes, anything from really small to really big. You're gonna get some type of wood, and usually lined in Spanish cedar. These look great and impart a cedar flavor into the cigars. They're great at holding moisture in because they're naturally wood, but one downside with these is that you have to season it. Because it's wood, it's also porous and wants to either hold or give off moisture. If the humidor isn't seasoned right, it's going to actually suck out moisture out of your cigars, which is the opposite of what you actually want. Next is a cooler. Now, coolers come in a variety of sizes and shapes too. They can be just a simple ice chest, or they can be something as extravagant and ornate as a wine cooler, and they have different types of electric style humidors. These are also great. They usually are lined with Spanish cedar shelves on the inside. A lot of times they keep a good temperature range. They have fans, lights, of course, glass doors that are sealed, and of course they hold a ton of cigars, so those can be very useful as well. Next are cabinet humidors, and you may see these at cigar shops, and these are just massive cigar humidors. They work essentially like just your standard small box desktop humidor, but just on a larger scale. And the last one are just travel cases. Now, these come in a variety of types of cases as well, but I find these are great because they hold a few cigars inside with a humidity pack or some type of humidity device on the inside. They usually have a good seal in there, so it can keep a few cigars pretty humidified for a long time. And of course, a lot of them have a hard shell or some type of protection on the outside that keeps them safe from bumps and scrapes, which is great. My next point is what exactly makes a good humidor in the first place. Now, I mentioned that humidors come in a lot of different shapes and sizes and formats, but really what makes a good humidor is the seal. The seal is what you're really looking for with a humidor, and not all humidors have this. Some people have done what they call the dollar bill test. If they have maybe a desktop humidor, a wooden humidor, they'll take a dollar bill and they'll slip it in the crack to see if it fits without any resistance. If it fits and doesn't have any resistance, the seal around that edge is not tight enough. Those humidors can be very leaky. Now, the way that you can fix that is you can take some simple tape, masking tape or painter's tape. I usually recommend 3M sealing tape, and you can put it around the edge of the seals, and that'll keep it tighter, and that'll keep the moisture inside. Even just one little strip of tape around the edge there can do a lot of good. And if you have glass panels on there, you want to also check those too. I would first start with the seal around the door, the outside of the door, and if it's still leaking out moisture, then you can check the glass seal and you can tape those as well. That's a simple hack that can transform maybe a cheap humidor into something that works like a charm. All right, my next point, seasoning. If you have a wooden humidor, as I've said before, you have to season it beforehand. These are made of wood, another material that likes to hold moisture in or give it off. If it's too dry, it will suck out the moisture out of your cigars. If it's too wet, it'll do the opposite. But seasoning your humidor ahead of time is kind of like charging the battery of your wooden humidor. It'll keep it charged, keep the moisture in there at a relatively good range. That way you don't have to fool with it and you don't have to worry about it sucking out moisture out of your cigars. Now, there are many different ways that you can do this. There's lots of different ways. They've been doing this for years and years and years. But the easiest way that I have seen personally is just with Boveda. Boveda is a great company that makes little humidified packs, but they have this one special pack that's a humidor starter kit. It comes with everything you need right away. The first thing you do, you take the 84% packs, put it in the humidor, leave it in there for a few weeks. When it's done, you take the 84% out, then you put the 72% in, and you're good to go. And that's all you got to do. Now, Boveda has the easiest way by far, but there are other ways that you can do it too. You can wipe your humidor down with a paper towel and distilled water. You can put a bowl of distilled water inside the humidor for short amounts of time. There are probably other ways too, but I just prefer Boveda because it's no nonsense, it's easy, and I don't have to risk the dangers of over humidifying. But if you have a plastic humidor, you don't even have to worry about seasoning. You're good to go right away. All right, so now that you have your humidor, you have it seasoned, now how do you humidify your humidor and your cigars? Again, the easiest way I've found is with Boveda. If you pre-season your humidor with Boveda, you already have these 72% packs. That's gonna keep your humidor humidified. There are other ways too. There's propylene glycol. That's a material that you can put inside a sponge. You may have seen a little tray with a sponge inside. You put that cigar juice, the propylene glycol in there. It keeps it humidified to around 70%. There are other things like beads. Those will do the same thing, but you can recharge it with distilled water, and that usually holds around 70% as well. I just prefer Boveda. They come in different humidity ranges, so I know exactly what I'm going to get. If it dries out, you throw them out or recharge them at your own peril, and then just replace them with a new one. Easy. They're not a sponsor. I just really love Boveda, and that's pretty much the industry standard, especially with buying cigars. You'll see Boveda packs in everything. My next point is that cigar boxes shouldn't be used as humidors. There's a couple of reasons for this. One of the main reasons is they just don't hold a lot, sometimes just 10, so you don't get a whole lot of space in there, but also they're not really meant to store things long term. They're not seasoned on the inside. They don't have good seals around the edges, and a lot of times they come packed in cellophane. The cellophane is what keeps them sealed. But there is a good purpose for cigar boxes, so definitely keep at least one on hand. So that brings me to my next point. Let's talk about dry boxing. Now, it may sound counterintuitive at first, but some people like to take their cigars and then dry them out a little bit before they smoke them. The rationale for this is that a humidor keeps a certain range of humidity that keeps them fresh, but it might not be ideal for smoking. So some people like to dry them out for a little bit, put them in a dry box. A dry box essentially is just a box that hasn't been seasoned that is drier than the contents of your humidor. So a cigar box can actually be helpful for this if you want to dry out a cigar. But cigar boxes are also great at this because they're also lined with cedar as well, so it does 2 for 1. Cut the cap. That'll make sure that both sides of the cigar will release a little bit of moisture. Put it in the dry box and you'll be good to go. And you can dry it out for as little as an hour, and sometimes that will really help a cigar. You can go up to a day, but I wouldn't go any farther than that. After about a day or so, you're kind of risking drying out that cigar too much. The important thing with dry boxing is you don't want to overly dry it. You just want to knock off a couple of percentage points of the humidity. My next point here is just test your cigar humidity. I've mentioned this before, but there's a couple of ways you can do this. The first way is just to squeeze it a little bit. A cigar should have a tiny bit of give there. It shouldn't be overly squishy, but it shouldn't be super tight. If it's really tight, like rock hard, that's probably because it's too wet and it needs to dry out some. Now, the squeeze test is not scientific. It's not going to give you an accurate reading, but a Cigarmatic is my next suggestion here. Use a Cigarmatic to check the humidity of that cigar. If it's over 72 to 75% in the cigar itself, I would dry it out a little bit. And if it's lower than 65%, you're going to have to leave it in your humidor for a while. Next important point is that humidity changes with temperature. Humidity and temperature are linked. So if the temperature rises, your humidity will also rise. If you're seasoning a humidor in the winter time, if you get everything within a certain humidity range that you're looking for, when the summertime comes around, that's going to ramp up in temperature and in humidity. And the opposite, of course, is true. So I would just suggest having something where you can change the way that you humidify your cigars, ways that you can add more humidity or pull out humidity. Now, let's talk about mold. Mold is the enemy. You want to stay away from mold. You want to mitigate this at all costs. Now, of course, there's many different types of molds, but if you see anything blue or green or hairy, you immediately have to throw out that cigar. It is not salvageable at all. There are some natural occurrences on cigars that are not mold. You may get dark spots on the leaf, or maybe even little tiny white spots. Both of those are totally fine. Some might call that bloom, but anything else, anything that looks bad, you want to stay away from. You can get sick and you can even die from this, so stay away from mold altogether. Now let's talk about how to mitigate mold, how to prevent it from getting in your humidor at all. The first thing you can do, of course, is just keep the humidity range lower. Like I said before, 69 to 72% is the sweet spot. It's humidified without going into the danger zone of mold territory. The next thing you can do, wash your hands. If you open up your humidor and you get a cigar, make sure you wash your hands first. That'll get rid of any debris or any mold spores that might be on your hands. You can't see them on your hands naturally dirty. So just wash your hands and dry them before handling your cigars in your humidor. Next, keeping cellophane on your cigars can also protect them as well. The cellophane acts almost like a protective layer, so the mold might attach to the outside but not the inside in some cases. So it can act almost like a shield. Next, just leave your cigars alone. You don't have to check your humidor every day or all the time. So that's one way of mitigating any kind of exposure to mold. Next is rotate your cigars. Now, you don't want to overly rotate them. Like I said, you don't want to kind of fondle them all the time, but every now and then, just rotate them, switch the bottom to the top, make sure you have a little bit even exposure on the inside there. That'll make sure the humidity is even from cigar to cigar. And the last and most important way to mitigate mold, monitor your humidity. You've got to monitor it. There's different tools that you can do that, but you've got to keep an eye on it. All right, now what do you do if you have a mold outbreak? This is really important. Sometimes it happens. It's happened to me before. First thing you do if you find mold, you throw out the cigars that have mold on them. You want to make sure that you actually see the mold on the cigar. If it's just on the wrapper, you can throw out the wrapper. But examine the cigars, make sure there's no mold on the actual actual cigar itself, especially the foot. After you've examined everything, throw out all the cigars that have mold on them, and then quarantine the rest. Take everything that hasn't been infected, quarantine them into a bag that's humidified at a lower range, and you're gonna have to let that sit for a couple of weeks. Next, examine your humidor. Check to see if there's any mold growing on the actual humidor itself. If you have a plastic humidor, you can just wipe it off. If you have a wooden one, then you'll have to sand it off and sand off that layer. Then you rub everything down with isopropyl alcohol to make sure it kills the rest of the mold that's inside the humidor. Let it air out for a day, seal it, sequester the humidor for a couple of weeks. After a few weeks, check the cigars again. If there's no mold on them, then you're good. Then what you have to do is that you have to re-season your humidor for a couple more weeks, and then you can transfer your cigars to your humidor again. You should be set. But if you examine your cigars at that time and you see more mold growing on them, then you have to do the whole process all over again. At the end, if you're good, transfer everything to your seasoned humidor and you should be good. All right, now that you have your humidor all set and ready to go, everything is seasoned, you have all your cigars in here, here's a few tips to consider here. Some of these I've already mentioned, but here's just a recap. First, don't overfill your humidor. You want to keep it to around 80% capacity and make sure there's enough air inside and humidity to get all the cigars, and that it doesn't over moisturize your humidor. The cigars themselves have moisture that they will add to the humidor. So if you add a lot of cigars there, it will just add more moisture. Keeping it underfilled to about 80% capacity is a general good rule of thumb. Next, just rotate your cigars every once in a while, every couple of months or so. Just rotate them from bottom to top, left to right. Just shuffle them around. That'll make sure everything is even. Next, of course, wash your hands. That'll make sure that there's no exposure to mold or any kind of bacteria or anything nasty. Next, of course, is to replace your humidity device in the summer and the winter and just scale it according to the temperature range. In the summer, you want to pull down your humidity range a little bit to adjust for the temperature. And in the winter, you want to do the opposite. Give it a little bit more humidity. Next, if you use Boveda packs, just make sure that you check the Boveda packs to see if they're still a little wet. You want to make sure it feels squishy and not starts to get crunchy. If it starts to get crunchy, you're going to have to immediately replace those. Or recharge if you dare. And a quick little tip about recharging Boveda packs, put it in a bag with some distilled water, let it absorb for a few days, and that should be good for recharging them. But just be careful. I would only use it on the small packs. I would not use it on the big packs to store in a humidor. And next is to keep your humidor in a cool, dry place that's dark as well. That'll make sure that the temperature is even. You don't want something to be too hot or too cold. And if you have glass panels on your humidor, or if you have a Tupper door, then keep it away from sunlight as well in a dark place. All right, next point here, cellophane. Do you take it or do you leave it? Now, there are different schools of thought when it comes to cellophane, but cellophane comes on every cigar that you purchase, and that's a good thing. Cellophane can protect your cigars from bumps and scrapes. It can protect against mold and bugs. When you're storing your cigars in a humidor, they can actually concentrate the flavor and keep it kind of fresher and newer tasting inside the cellophane. But if you take the cellophane off, it will acclimate to your humidor better, and it will mellow out over time a little bit more, and it will age better in the humidor. It'll take on more of the cedar flavor of your humidor if you have a wooden one. It's a personal choice, so just experiment to see what you like. And if you have multiples of the same cigar, it's just an easy experiment to take some off and put them in your humidor. All right, now that we have everything out of the way, here's a few tools that I really recommend, especially if you're storing your cigars. Some of these I've already mentioned. First, Boveda packs. You probably already have some if you bought cigars before in the past. You probably have some of the small ones, the 69% ones. Those are great. Keep them, save them, keep them in bags. If you ever need one, you can put cigars in the bag with the Boveda packs. They're easy, no fuss, no muss. I want something easy. Boveda is easy. They are a must-have. Next choice is Boveda bags. Now, I love zip top bags. They're a very useful tool within your repertoire for cigars. The Mylar bags are also really cool. You can reuse those as well. If you don't have any of those, Boveda makes some as well. These are just normal zip top bags. They make them in different sizes though. What I like about these in particular, these are thicker and sturdier, so they do protect things a little bit better. I find the seal on these is really good too, so these are excellent just for storing a few cigars in them. Or the large bags are really handy to have if you want to store a lot of cigars in them. They're really great. Next is a humidity sensor. There's different types of humidity sensors that you can use. Some humidors will have hygrometers on them. Some of them will be just the dials. I don't trust those. Those tend to not be very accurate. The one that I like the most though is Govee. Govee has a small hygrometer. It syncs up through Bluetooth and syncs up to an app on your phone. So on your phone, you can check the humidity of your humidor or humidors, multiple ones, without having to open it and without having to move things around. And it gives very accurate and detailed reports in the app. The next tool I suggest is a Cigarmatic. Now, Cigarmatic is a tool that checks the local humidity of the actual cigar. It has little prongs that stick out on the tool. You stick it into the cigar. It does a little calculation and gives you a relative readout of what the humidity range is on the inside of the cigar. That's important too, because the cigar might not be the same humidity as the actual humidor is itself. This will also give you good information to see if the cigar is ready, if it's humidified. That leaves the guesswork out of it. You know what the humidity is in your humidor. Now you know what the humidity is in each cigar. And the last tool that can be really useful here is a Zycar humidor fan. Now, I don't see a lot of people talking about this, but this is a really small fan that can fit in your humidor. It takes batteries. It has fans that go in different directions. It doesn't take up that much space, and every 15 minutes, it will actually circulate some air within your humidor. And since you want to keep your humidor kind of underfilled, putting the fan in there is a great tool to make sure that the air and humidity circulates evenly within your humidor. And to round off the video, what do I suggest for humidors? Well, you'll have to stay tuned for another video to find out. That, I think, is all I have. If I missed anything, let me know. Did I miss something about humidors that no one told me or told you? Let me know down in the comments. I would love to hear your extra thoughts here. And of course, if you're building your humidor, definitely check out the links below. Thank you again for watching. If you want to go watch more of my cigar videos, what no one told me about cigars, you can go watch it up there, or you can go watch more of my cigar video playlist up there. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time. I'm Dave with Beast Made Reviews.